Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. A live look at some of the cities being impacted by this historic blizzard that's now starting to move in, hitting several states in the Northeast. At least 6 of them have declared states of emergency in preparation for this storm. For more on this, let's bring in a Washington Post meteorologist, Ben Noll. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Ben, we've been watching live as the snow is starting to come down. We've seen New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania being impacted pretty majorly already. What are we seeing right now in terms of snow totals, temperatures? What are the conditions looking like out there?
Yeah, so this storm is really just getting underway. We're starting to see snow pick up in intensity from the eastern mid-Atlantic to southern New England. So New York City now reporting moderate snow. It had snowed lightly throughout the day, but the storm is now starting to intensify. It's right off the Delmarva Peninsula, so to the east of Maryland and Delaware. And overnight, that storm is going to intensify rapidly. So these pictures that you see on screen now, snow generally kind of falling gently, that is going to escalate and intensify dramatically as we go Sunday night into Monday. So the scenes are going to be very different by the time people awaken on Monday, anywhere from DC right up to Boston.
And officials are expecting the impacts of this storm to last several days. We know that thousands of flights have been impacted. We've seen school closures for Monday. What can we expect leading into next week as this storm continues?
Yeah, look, I think the recovery from this storm is going to be gradual because areas are probably going to lose power. I mean, we're looking at that stretch from Delaware up to eastern Massachusetts as kind of the zone of highest impact in terms of snowfall, where localized totals could push up to 2 feet. But what separates this storm from past storms is the strength and therefore the intensity of the wind. We're looking at wind gusts that will reach tropical storm to low end hurricane force. You're talking 60, 70, even 80 miles an hour in some coastal areas. And when you combine the weight, the sheer magnitude of the snow on trees and power lines, and then you factor in those winds, that's when the concern mounts and builds about power outages. So, places like southeastern Massachusetts, from Boston southward to the Cape and the surrounding islands, we could be looking at 18 to 24 inches combined with low end hurricane force winds. And that's going to leave a mark. And it's going to take several days for that cleanup to occur. So school closures, I think, are kind of a guarantee for Monday. But then you start to look at Tuesday and beyond for these areas that are hardest hit and how long some of that recovery ends up taking.
And as you mentioned, snow is not the only concern here. Those high winds also can be dangerous. And then flooding also for those coastal areas. What's the concern there for those cities?
Yeah, so really from coastal Delaware and Virginia right up into Massachusetts, we're looking at a risk for coastal flooding. So basically, winds that are swirling around the storm pile up water near the coast that pushes inland, and we also have higher tides. So on top of the strong storm, we have these higher tides, and when you factor in those two things, you're looking at moderate to maybe locally major coastal flooding. Massachusetts, there's high tides coming up early Monday morning and again later in the afternoon. Was just looking at some of those tide times. That is when the risk for inundation, water going onto the roads near the coast, even swamping some structures along the coastline, that's when that risk is highest during the high tide. So if you do live along the coast, you'll probably be well aware of when your high tide times are, but certainly heed any of those warnings. We hear a lot about wind and snow from this event and power outages, but for people along the coast, there is this added risk of coastal flooding and inundation that's certainly worth taking very seriously.
And we did hear from officials in several states saying they are preparing for possible widespread power outages, like you mentioned. And at least 6 states declared states of emergency ahead of this storm to get the resources all ready to deal with the impacts of it. It's so widespread, the impacts of this blizzard. What areas are you looking at specifically that might be the most concerning, maybe places that don't typically see this kind of weather?
Yeah, look, it's been a couple of years since the Northeast and Mid Atlantic has had a winter quite this bad. So I think at this point, people are a bit winter weary. You factor in another a blizzard here. There's 35 million people that are under blizzard warnings at this point. That's a huge number, about 10% of the population of the contiguous United States. 65 million are under winter weather alerts related to the storm. That's about 20% of the population. So this is a storm that is hitting a densely populated stretch, the most densely populated stretch of the United States. So the impact, therefore, is higher. We're going to, see cities, basically just blasted by this storm, traffic slowed, flights halted, grounded for several days. So the impact is slow. This is a big hub. So, I mean, really, if you're anywhere from Atlantic City, New Jersey, places along the Jersey Shore, the whole state of New Jersey is under a blizzard warning at this point. That's just an incredible statistic to kind of comprehend there. Right up through Long Island. In Massachusetts, it's kind of been a couple of years where we've been, maybe I guess treated to somewhat milder winter conditions, and now we're feeling a winter that reminds us of one that maybe happened decades ago. You look at the winters of the mid 1990s, the winters of the late 1970s as kind of comparisons to what we're experiencing here. And dare I say, just for people in this corridor, so they're aware, there is actually more storm threats later this week. So for people that will be recovering, another period of snow is possible on Wednesday morning across this region, probably not quite as bad as nearly as bad as this one. And then maybe a bigger storm later Thursday into Friday. So that is something to keep in mind as people begin to dig out. And for those areas that do get hit hardest here, from Delaware up into Massachusetts, if those power outages last until those next storms arrive, kind of how they cope and deal with those factors as well.
So people should definitely be heeding those warnings from officials. We have travel advisories and travel bans in New York City overnight tonight into about noon tomorrow. So just one last thing here. We keep hearing the word historic when we talk about this blizzard. Can you give us an idea of what exactly makes this storm in particular so historic compared to other winter storms we've seen in the past years?
Yeah, I think, you can look at that a couple of different ways. And it's a good question. I mean, you look at the snow totals. So, how much snow falls. And for many of these eastern cities, northeastern cities, once you get up past that 20-inch mark, you're looking at, a top 10 storm in a lot of these cities. So I think, in places like New York, where the, accumulations are expected to probably surpass maybe a foot and a half, you could be sitting at a storm that ends up in the top 10. Same potentially for Boston as well. And then you look at the intensity of the storm. We're looking at a system that could rival a high-end Category 2 hurricane in terms of its strength and air pressure by the time Monday morning rolls around. And that is certainly on the upper echelon, the upper kind of ranks of what we might expect to see from a normal kind of a winter storm here along the East Coast. And then, of course, with the winds, which factor into that, it's one thing to get a foot of snow, but it's a totally different thing to get up to 2 feet of snow with winds that are blowing 70 or 80 miles an hour. So factor that all in, and we're looking at a pretty, serious impact here for the northeastern corridor.
And we'll definitely be watching and bringing those updates as the storm continues to move into the Northeast. Ben Noll, meteorologist with the Washington Post, thank you so much for your insight here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.